Imagine this. You stand before a mirror in the quiet of night, the world outside reduced to whispers. Your reflection stares back, familiar yet unsettling, because for a fleeting moment you catch a glimpse of something else, a shadow, not cast by light, but by the parts of yourself you've buried, the insecurities, the cruel thoughts, the fears you'd never confess to anyone, least of all yourself. Carl Jung called this the shadow, and its existence is a paradox. The more we deny it, the more it controls us. The concept begins with a brutal dismantling of our collective illusion that anyone is exempt from this darkness. You feel the shadow. It slithers into the silence between your thoughts, manifests in the trembling before a major decision, or in the way your stomach knots when someone praises you too loudly, as if they might discover the fraud you suspect yourself to be. This isn't abstract psychology. It's the visceral reality of being human. The shadow isn't a metaphor for occasional guilt or regret. It's the sum of all we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. And the terrifying truth is this: we are already the person we're afraid of becoming. Nietzsche's warning echoes here. When you gaze into the abyss gazes also into you. But what if the abyss isn't some external void? What if it's the unlit corners of your own psyche? We are forced to confront a discomforting symmetry. The brighter the light of our idealized self, the successful persona, the perfect parent, the infallible leader, the sharper and more distorted the shadow it casts. This isn't a flaw in our nature. It's a fundamental law of it. The shadow isn't a mistake to be corrected. It's the inevitable byproduct of consciousness itself. Just as life implies death and creation demands destruction, our aspirations toward goodness generate their own opposites within us. Consider the modern obsession with curated identities. Our culture thrives on the illusion of shadowless lives, endless streams of achievements, smiles, and filtered perfection. Yet there's a grotesque irony. The more we polish our external personas, the more the shadow festers in the gaps. Someone adored by many might lie awake at night, paralyzed by the fear that their true self, the insecure, exhausted, messy human, might leak into the frame. The shadow isn't silenced by validation, it's enraged by it. It mutates us into imposter syndrome, into the gnawing sense that every success is a fluke, every relationship a transaction waiting to collapse. The most unsettling insight isn't that we have shadows, it's that our attempts to outrun them are what give them power. But why does this matter? Because the shadow isn't passive. When denied, it doesn't dissipate, it retaliates. There's a chilling parallel to stories like Peter Pan, the boy who refused to grow up. His shadow, detached and rebellious, wreaks havoc until he confronts it. We are no different. The parts of ourselves we disown don't vanish. They resurface as self-sabotage, as unexplained anger, as the inexplicable urge to destroy what we've built. The warning is clear. Integration is the only path to peace. Yet here lies the cruelest twist. The very systems that promise to protect us, education, social norms, the bubble of superficial reassurance, are the ones that teach us to fear the shadow in the first place. What if the anxiety we blame on the shadow isn't caused by its existence, but by our refusal to face it? We're left dangling on this precipice. The next step isn't into darkness, it's through it. But how? And what waits on the other side? The shadow does not announce itself. It operates in the subconscious, a silent architect of our contradictions. The cruel remark that slips out after years of practiced politeness, the sudden jealousy toward a loved one's success, the inexplicable urge to sabotage our own happiness. These aren't lapses in character, they're the shadow's language. To understand its power, we must dissect how it thrives in the gap between who we are and who we pretend to be. Jung's genius was in recognizing the shadow not as a moral failing, but as a psychological inevitability. Like a photographic negative, it develops in the absence of light. The qualities we suppress don't disappear, but invert and intensify. A man who prides himself on rationality may find his shadow erupting in irrational rages. A preacher who denies his humanity becomes a hypocrite. This is the shadow's first mechanism. What we resist persists, and what we deny defines us. Modernity has perfected new ways to feed this cycle. Social media didn't create the shadow, but it gave us industrial-scale tools to fragment ourselves. Every curated post, every performative act of kindness, every humble brag about late-night productivity adds another brick to the wall between our ideal self and our shadow. The more we construct this false edifice, the more energy the shadow gathers in the dark. Like a repressed memory, it doesn't fade, it mutates. The influencer who markets authenticity becomes incapable of recognizing their own truth. The CEO who preaches work-life balance secretly resents employees for having families. These aren't hypocrisies. They're the shadow's inevitable counterbalance to our performed identities. Philosophy offers a lens to understand this duality. Hegel's dialectic suggests that every thesis generates its antithesis. Our conscious identity naturally breeds its unconscious opposite. Foucault would argue that the very act of naming goodness creates categories of badness we must then exile to the shadow. Even neuroscience confirms this. When we suppress emotions, the amygdala works overtime, ensuring those feelings return with greater force. The shadow isn't some primitive remnant. It's the mind's way of maintaining equilibrium. Consider the phenomenon of toxic positivity. In banning negative emotions from acceptable discourse, we don't eliminate sadness or anger. We force them underground, where they merge with shame, to form something far more dangerous. A generation raised on good vibes only now battles unprecedented anxiety. This is the shadow's second mechanism. Repression breeds possession. Like the dybbuk of Jewish folklore, the disowned parts of ourselves eventually take the wheel. The most insidious deception is that we imagine integration requires us to become our shadow, to embrace cruelty if we've been kind, or weakness if we've been strong. But Jung's revelation is subtler. Integration means recognizing these opposites as part of a whole. The compassionate person who acknowledges their capacity for cruelty doesn't become cruel. They become whole. The strong person who admits vulnerability doesn't become weak. They become real. This raises an uncomfortable question. What if our entire culture is structured to prevent this wholeness? Consumerism thrives on self-loathing. Politics runs on projected shadows, the evil opponent who embodies what we deny in ourselves. Even spirituality has been co-opted, with wellness gurus selling enlightenment as yet another product to consume, rather than a confrontation with the self. We've built entire industries on shadow displacement. The way out begins with a simple but radical act: to stop seeing the shadow as the enemy and recognize it as the exiled teacher. When anger surfaces, it might be signaling a boundary violation. When envy appears, it could point to unacknowledged aspirations. The shadow speaks in code, but its message is always the same. Here is what you've refused to see about yourself. We carry our shadows into the world like invisible wounds, leaking their poison into relationships, institutions, and entire cultures. The unclaimed darkness we refuse to face doesn't vanish, it metastasizes. Look closely at any societal dysfunction, and you'll find the collective shadow at work. the politician who crusades against moral decay while hiding affairs, the corporation that markets sustainability while exploiting workers, the outraged mob that destroys in the name of justice. These aren't mere hypocrisies. They're case studies in what happens when shadows go unchecked. History shows us the catastrophic potential of disowned darkness. The Holocaust didn't begin with gas chambers. It began with ordinary people projecting their shadows onto convenient scapegoats. The financial crash of 2008 wasn't just about greed. It revealed a culture that worshipped success while disavowing its ruthless underpinnings. Even our current epidemic of loneliness stems from a collective shadow. We've built a world that prizes connection while systematically destroying the vulnerability required to achieve it. The shadow always exacts its price, whether through societal collapse, environmental devastation, or the quiet despair of lives lived inauthentically. Psychology offers a name for this phenomenon: projection. It's the mind's desperate attempt to externalize what it cannot accept internally. We see this in every culture war, every political feud, every workplace conflict. The traits we condemn most violently in others are often the very ones we've exiled within ourselves. A pastor obsessed with homosexuality may be fighting his own desires. An activist who destroys property in the name of justice may be acting out personal rage. This isn't to equate these actions morally, but to reveal their shared psychological root. The unintegrated shadow, demanding recognition. Modern technology has amplified this dynamic to terrifying proportions. Social media has become the world's largest projection screen, where we hurl our disowned darkness at strangers through anonymous comments and viral outrage. The algorithms know this. They feed on our shadow energy, rewarding the most polarized versions of ourselves. We've created a hall of mirrors where shadows multiply infinitely, each reflection more distorted than the last. The result? A society that can't distinguish between enemies and projections, between real threats and the monsters we've invented to carry our shame. Yet there's another possibility, one glimpsed in ancient myths and modern breakthroughs alike. When individuals dare to integrate their shadows, the effects ripple outward. The recovering alcoholic who shares their story breaks the stigma for others. The leader who admits vulnerability creates space for authentic connection. History's true transformers, from Gandhi to Mandela, weren't shadowless saints, but people who'd made peace with their darkness and could therefore confront the worlds without hypocrisy. This integration has a compounding effect. Just as trauma can pass through generations, so too can wholeness. A parent who acknowledges their anger teaches their child that emotions aren't enemies. A community that faces its racist past creates the possibility of real reconciliation. The shadow doesn't disappear through these acts. It transforms from a source of destruction to a wellspring of creativity. Jung believed our greatest gifts often lie buried in the shadow, waiting to be reclaimed. The artist's power comes from accessing forbidden emotions. The healer's strength grows from confronting personal pain. Even societal progress depends on acknowledging what we've tried to forget. We stand at a crossroads. The challenges of our time, climate change, political polarization, mental health crises, all demand that we stop projecting our shadows and start owning them. This isn't about narcissistic self-absorption, but about taking responsibility for the darkness we've outsourced to others. What if activism began with shadow work? What if leadership required emotional integration? What if justice meant acknowledging our own complicity before demanding change from others? The invitation is clear. We must stop fighting monsters and start making peace with the ones we've created. The shadow will either be your most vicious adversary or your most unexpected ally. The choice is yours. But choose quickly, for the hour grows late, and the reckoning comes whether we're ready or not. The final question isn't whether we'll face our shadows, but whether we'll do so while there's still time to use their power for creation rather than destruction.